The Conservative candidate for London Mayor has said that tackling crime is her priority should she be voted in to take over at City Hall. Susan Hall's currently at the Tory party conference in Manchester and is the first mayoral candidate not to be asked to give a speech to the main conference. She spoke to our political correspondent Simon Harris.
I will be sitting at my desk in City Hall as your first female Labour... no, not Labour...
Perhaps it was nerves, perhaps it was the excitement, but Susan Hall's conference week didn't get off to the smoothest of starts. Even before this slip of the tongue, the Tory mayoral hopeful had seemingly been relegated to appearing at a handful of fringe meetings. In the past, every Conservative candidate for mayor has been allowed to make a speech in the main conference hall. But for reasons which aren't clear, Susan Hall hasn't been invited to address the delegates. In 2003, the Tories' then candidate, Steve Norris, was given an enthusiastic welcome by party members in Blackpool.
Maybe it's conference organisation, I don't know. I think it's a missed opportunity, I have to say, but doesn't mean we won't win in May. I'm pretty confident of that.
Hall was a surprise choice as Conservative candidate. She was on a shortlist which excluded Paul Scully, the experienced Minister for London. Last month, Sadiq Khan accused her of having questionable values after it emerged she liked a tweet featuring Enoch Powell and the words, "It's never too late to get London back." You liked a tweet that featured Enoch Powell. Do you regret that?
Yes, because, I'm a serial tweeter, as you know, Simon, and I press like. But nobody has ever said to me, oh my goodness, I don't approve of you because of your tweets. It's just, I shouldn't have done it. I've apologised for anything that's offended anybody.
Hall has promised to scrap the ULEZ extension if elected, and a recent opinion poll suggested she and Khan are almost neck and neck. But she says her priority will be tackling crime.
We don't have enough police on the streets, despite the fact that we've got more frontline officers than we've ever had before. And I genuinely think that that makes a great deal of difference. If people think they can get away with things, they will.
There may have been some faltering steps in her campaign, but here Hall is among friends.
She's very popular. She's got the experience. She knows what she's talking about.
She is somebody that will do what she says. What you see is what you get with her.
Do you think she stands a chance of being mayor?
Oh, of course, yeah. In all the polls, if you see that, she's neck and neck, and she's going to campaign very well in the next year.
Susan Hall has 7 months to convince Londoners.
Well, Simon joins us now from the Tory party conference, as you can see. And the Transport Secretary, Mark Harper, did get a speech this morning, and it was full of praise for Susan, wasn't it?
Yes, Charlene, he's been fleshing out the government's pro-car policies, which have been developed in the wake of the Uxbridge by-election and the anti-ULEZ backlash. Among the measures proposed by ministers are restrictions on local authorities curbing their powers to introduce 20-mile-an-hour zones. Transport for London has recently announced 65 additional kilometres of lowered speed limits. And there'll also be curbs on 24-hour bus lanes. Not surprisingly, in view of what happened in Uxbridge, and Mr Harper also wanted to fire a shot across Sadiq Khan's bows.
Susan Hall, the Conservative candidate for Mayor of London, the only person who can defeat Sadiq Khan, cancel his ULEZ expansion and turn London blue again.
And before you go, Simon, has there been an update about HS2 from the Transport Secretary yet?
The one thing Mr Harper didn't want to talk about today was HS2. The government has been trying rather unsuccessfully to shut down any speculation that it's going to axe the leg between Birmingham and Manchester. Not surprisingly, rather awkward for the government, seeing as Manchester is hosting the Tory party conference this week. However, ITV News understands that that leg between Birmingham and Manchester is going to be at least put on hold, if not cancelled altogether. What we don't know yet is whether that will also mean no further work on the leg between Old Oak Common and Euston, which has been put on hold for 2 years.
OK, Simon, thanks very much. Next, ITV News understands the HS2 Euston connection to Old Oak Common will go ahead. The whole multi-billion-pound project is under scrutiny like never before, with the Prime Minister expected to confirm tomorrow that the line won't extend to Manchester as planned, raising questions about whether any of this was worth the expense and huge inconvenience. Here's our political correspondent, Simon Harris, from the Tory party conference.
It should be one of London's busiest building sites, but work to create Euston's new megastation is at a standstill. The lives of local people and businesses have been turned upside down. Hundreds of millions of pounds have been spent. But is Rishi Sunak about to end the uncertainty over the HS2 line to Euston? In a series of TV interviews here in Manchester, the Prime Minister refused to be drawn on what he's decided to do about HS2. But there's widespread speculation that while the leg from Birmingham to Manchester will be scrapped, he could announce a reprieve for Euston as early as tomorrow. This is as far as the Prime Minister would go.
I know there's a lot of speculation on this, but I just want to reassure people. I approach this the same way I approach everything. Thoughtfully, responsibly, carefully, across the detail to make the right long-term decision for the country.
The new Euston station was supposed to cost £2.6 billion, but in April the project was put on hold after the bill ballooned to £4.8 billion. This is how it was meant to look. The boss of one of the construction firms involved called it over-specified and elaborate. So now the company is proposing a cheaper alternative.
A cheaper, slimmed-down scheme is one without a roof. It's effectively like London Bridge or many other stations we see around the country. It has a platform with canopies on them. So it's much more simple. It means we can get people out safely, we can board them safely, but more importantly, it's really easy to build.
If HS2 doesn't reach Euston, passengers will be forced to change onto the Elizabeth line at Old Oak Common. The promised shorter train journey from Birmingham to central London might actually take longer.
Absolutely, I want to see the line go to Euston, but we'll have to see on that. There's no doubt that a connection to Old Oak Common and into Crossrail is also a hugely important transport asset for our capital city. And obviously the final stretch between Old Oak Common and Euston is extremely expensive.
As for the decision to axe the line to Manchester, one former Transport Secretary had this verdict.
Really important. It's the equivalent of, only half doing the M25 or stopping the motorway system at Birmingham.
Even if the government does give the Euston project the kiss of life, it's likely to be another decade before the promised high-speed trains arrive.
And Simon, there was a little bit of drama at the Tory party conference this afternoon, wasn't there?
Yes, Charlene, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, was making her big speech. She said ministers must challenge what she called the poison of subjects like gender ideology, when she was suddenly interrupted by a voice from the audience. It was Andrew Boff, the Conservative chair of the London Assembly.
Things just get worse. There's no such thing as gender ideology. Institutions become captured. No, this is true. As always happens when the left gets young.
Mr Boff was swiftly escorted from the hall by police and security. Heckling, it seems, is not an acceptable part of the political debate here. Well, I caught up with Mr Boff a short time ago.
Well, the Home Secretary said some things which I found quite objectionable. I consider them bullying. I consider them bullying trans people and in the LGBT community. She used those tropes of that word gender ideology, which of course doesn't exist. And, I was born and brought up to believe that when you see a bully, you challenge them. And that's what I was doing.
Mr Boff was escorted in what appeared to be quite a heavy-handed response. He was taken not just from the conference hall, but from the entire conference venue and had his pass taken away from him. He now assumes that's the end of his conference week here, although Suella Braverman has apparently said he should be forgiven and allowed back in. At the moment, he's planning to go out and have a few drinks.
Simon, thanks very much.
Good evening. What does a high-quality new rail terminal look like when its budget has been slashed by billions? In his party conference speech today, the Prime Minister confirmed HS2 will not run from Birmingham to Manchester as planned. It will, however, still go to Euston Station, but with a £6.5 billion cut. And that means fewer platforms, as well as less access to the underground. As for HS2 bosses, the government says it no longer wants them in charge of the Euston project, as our political correspondent Simon Harris explains.
The London to Manchester high-speed railway was finally stopped in its tracks today when the Prime Minister confirmed the worst-kept secret in politics.
I am cancelling the rest of the HS2 project.
The line from London will only go as far as Birmingham. At Euston, where work is on hold for 2 years because of soaring costs, the Prime Minister offered a lifeline, but with strings attached.
For the management of HS2, will no longer be responsible for the Euston site. There must be some accountability for the mistakes made, for the mismanagement of this project.
And the revised Euston will be a drastically scaled back version. The new HS2 station at Euston will now have 6 platforms instead of 10. Plans for a pedestrian tunnel to allow passengers to walk to Euston Square tube station have been scrapped. And crucially, £6.5 billion, which was to have been spent on this site, will now be given to other parts of the country. That set alarm bells ringing at City Hall.
Rishi Sunak announced today a £6 billion cuts from the budget in Euston. He announced today a Euston development, so no details are given, and I worry we're going to get a second-rate station in Euston rather than a world-leading station that Euston deserves.
Robert has lived with the Euston construction site on his doorstep for 6 years and has heard it all before.
What we should remember is last time they tried to save costs was in 2021. They were going to reduce the number of platforms from 11 to 10. What was the outcome? The scheme was going to cost £106 million more.
The delays and disruption have had a devastating impact on local businesses.
2026 was the original timeline. How much delay is it going to be from that? And what sort of aid support package will be provided to the local traders, local residents?
It's not just bad for London, it's bad for the whole country. The United Kingdom is the only developed country in the whole world that does not have a highly developed high-speed rail network.
The government says Euston will open as soon as possible, but it's likely Old Oak Common in West London will still be needed as a temporary terminus. The question no one can answer is for how long?
You know, Simon, that's one of the questions, because there are many unanswered questions here, aren't there?
There are lots, beginning with when will the truncated line to Birmingham open? It's supposed to be sometime between 2029 and 2032. When will work resume on the Euston site, and when will that station be ready? Where's the government going to find this £6.5 billion of money in savings at Euston to give to other parts of the country? It seems that private investors in the Euston regeneration programme might be expected to cough up. And of course, will Labour reverse the decision to axe the line to Manchester if it wins the general election? That's a question I hope to be able to put to Sir Keir Starmer when he speaks to us tomorrow.
All right, Simon, thank you.
Next tonight, the Labour leader has confirmed that Diane Abbott is still under investigation after suggesting Jewish people do not face racism. Last month, the Hackney MP branded the inquiry into her fraudulent, but today Sir Keir Starmer hit back, saying her comments were out of line. He also spoke about the ongoing issues of HS2 and ULEZ as he spoke to our political correspondent Simon Harris in his constituency of Holborn and St Pancras.
Sir Keir, would a Labour government commit to reinstating the HS2 line to Manchester?
The whole thing has been a complete fiasco. Billions of pounds wasted, promises ripped up, blown a hole in the project. So I can't stand here and answer your question and commit to reversing the decision the Prime Minister made yesterday. What I can say is an incoming Labour government will work with mayors, with business leaders across the country to ensure that we get the connectivity that we need.
Including
But this, I mean, that was a local issue in relation to Euston in the middle of my constituency. But the concept of high-speed rail across the country, vitally important, and that is why it's, you know, a shame that the government has now blown this huge hole in it, and it's pretending that it's going to use the money for projects which are actually reheated, re-announced versions of projects that have been announced many, many times before.
You said the ULEZ expansion cost you the Uxbridge by-election.
Yes.
Do you think the mayor should still suspend it?
Well, look, that's obviously a question for the mayor, and I talk to his office all of the time. In principle, of course, I'll be straightforward. I don't want my children drinking dirty water. I don't want my children breathing in dirty air, and I suspect I speak for many people across London when I say that. But on the other hand, I do think that when it comes to clean air, we need to look at options that are least impactful on those that can least afford it.
Are you worried it's going to cost you seats at the election?
Well, I think at the election, the central issue is going to be the economy. We've had almost no growth in the economy for 13 years. The country is on its knees. The health service is flat on its face. And everywhere I go, that's the issue that people want to talk about.
Some of your London MPs are worried about the impact of ULEZ.
I understand that. And of course, they will be picking up concerns on the ground. But in the end, if you go into a general election, the single most important question is, can you get this country going again? Can you rebuild? Can you give us our future back? And that has to be a central argument about the economy. Because
when did you
we
last
will
speak
only...
to Sadiq Khan about ULEZ?
Oh, I speak to Sadiq Khan regularly. My office is in touch with his office
Have you spoken
every
to
day.
him about ULEZ lately?
I've spoken to Sadiq a number of times about ULEZ.
What's your message to him?
Well, I'm not going to disclose my confidential discussions with... I've known Sadiq Khan for 25 years, and we have a good working relationship. He's doing a great job as mayor, taking difficult decisions that others would duck.
In April, you accused Diane Abbott of making anti-Semitic comments, withdrew the Labour whip. She says you're trying to stop her standing as an MP. Are you?
I think anybody who read what Diane Abbott had written would be shocked, and it was inevitable that there would have to be an investigation into that. The process is ongoing. It'll have to come to a conclusion. But I don't think even Diane Abbott herself would try to defend what she wrote.
Sir Keir, thank you for talking to us.
Thank you.